Langford trusted his neighbors. He never imagined they'd turn his family barn into a toxic dumping ground. When the HOA said community storage, they really meant industrial waste. What began with broken furniture ended in hazmat suits, federal subpoenas, and a buried conspiracy worth millions. One man stood alone until the truth spilled out from beneath the floorboards. They tried to ruin him with silence. He answered with fire. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. It started with a friendly neighbor asking for a temporary favor. I had no idea it would become a battlefield. I never thought much about power until I watched my own barn get taken from me. Inch by inch, decision by decision, all under the polite smile of the neighborhood I used to love. I live on the edge of a modest semi-rural development in western North Carolina. The kind of place where deer cross your driveway in the morning and the postman still waves. My property's been in my family since my grandfather built the barn with his own hands back in 19. It's more than a structure, it's legacy. It's the smell of fresh hay, the warmth of summers spent stacking feed, and the creak of those old wood beams that still held strong through 3 hurricanes and a divorce. When I inherited the property 5 years ago, I knew I wasn't just inheriting land, I was inheriting responsibility. And with it came the HOA. Now let me be clear, I've never been one to ruffle feathers. I paid my dues. I showed up to the potlucks when I could, smiled during neighborhood meetings, and kept my lawn trimmed to regulation. The HOA was more of a background hum, annoying sometimes, like when they sent me a letter about my compost bin being unsightly, but manageable, until Dale. Dale moved in 2 streets over last year. Retired contractor, all charisma and 2 white teeth. He was the kind of guy who called you buddy while calculating how to take something from you. He stopped by one afternoon, beer in hand, leaned on my fence like he owned the place. "Hey," he said casually, "we've got a bit of a situation. The community shed's overflowing with some stuff from the rec center reno. Just for a week or 2, mind if we tuck it in your barn?" I hesitated, but it felt harmless. "A week or 2, I asked. "Scout's honor," he grinned. "Just until the new place clears inspection." It felt neighborly. My barn had room, and part of me still believed in good faith. So I said yes. That was the last clean breath my barn would take. At first, it was a few sealed boxes, then a water-damaged filing cabinet. Then came the broken chairs, busted drywall, what looked like torn-up carpet rolls. I went to open the side doors one morning, and the hinges strained like they were groaning under a new weight. The musty air hit me, sharp and synthetic. I called Dale. Yeah, meant to stop by. A couple other folks needed space too. Community effort, right? All approved." "Approved?" I asked, confused. HOA board signed off. "It's just temporary storage." No one had asked me. No one had told me. I wasn't just confused. I was blindsided. I attended the next HOA meeting, assuming there'd been a mistake. I raised my hand. Did the board approve using my barn for community storage? There was a pause. Then Helen, the HOA president, an older woman with a permanent squint and clipped words, cleared her throat. "According to Clause 14b, auxiliary structures may be designated for neighborhood utility in the event of overflow, assuming no formal objection is on record." "But it's my barn," I said, stunned. "You didn't file an objection." "I didn't know it was happening." Helen gave a small smile. "Well, now you do." They moved to the next agenda item. I walked home in a daze. That barn was on my deed, my taxes, my upkeep. But somehow, through some twisted loophole, I'd become a landlord to the neighborhood's garbage. Days passed. The piles inside grew. A neighbor even dumped old paint cans, one leaking through the floorboards. The air turned foul. I tried locking the doors. They cut the padlock off. Dale left me a note. "Access needed. Don't make this harder than it is." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a quiet invasion. They'd hijacked my barn and I had no idea what they'd put in there or what was coming next. I used to think the worst thing about an HOA was the passive-aggressive notes about your grass being a half-inch too long. Turns out, the real danger isn't the rules, it's how they bend them behind your back. After that meeting, the one where Helen calmly told me I'd essentially agreed to let the neighborhood use my barn, I tried to play it cool. I told myself it was temporary, that people would do the right thing, that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't personal. But the garbage didn't stop. It multiplied. One morning, I found 3 rusted bicycles leaning against the barn doors. Another day, it was a box of old fluorescent bulbs, cracked open and leaking white dust. Someone had dragged in what looked like a broken restaurant fryer. And still, no one asked. No one even looked me in the eye. I stopped Dale on his morning walk. He always paraded around like he was on patrol. "Hey," I said, "we need to talk about the barn. It's not a dump." He smirked like I'd just told him the sky was blue. "It's being used for community overflow, like we discussed. It's in the charter." "No," I said. "You discussed it. You didn't ask me." He tapped the HOA handbook he carried like a Bible. Section 17 Seed Environmental Use Clause. Any underutilized structure may be purposed for community service during facility upgrades.
That clause is about compost bins and picnic tables.
Interpretations at the board's discretion. His smile tightened. "And we are the board." That's when it clicked. This wasn't a lapse in communication. It was calculated. I went to the HOA office that afternoon, asking to review the board minutes, public records, bylaw. The woman at the desk, Joyce, who once brought me banana bread when my mom passed, avoided my eyes. "Oh, those files are under review. You'll need to submit a request form." "Can I get the form?" She slid it across, her hands shaking just a bit. "Processing takes up to 60 days. 60 days. They knew exactly what they were doing. Buy time. Bury the truth. Keep the dump going." That evening, I walked the neighborhood, watched curtains twitch, lawn chairs fall silent. The same people who once waved over barbecue grills now barely nodded. I was becoming that guy. The problem. The complainer. Even the kids stayed away from my yard now. I started snapping photos of every leak, every pile, every suspicious barrel tucked in the corner. I kept them in a folder on my desktop labeled Evidence, just in case. The more I dug, the stranger it got. One neighbor, Jenny, stopped me near the mailboxes and whispered. I didn't want to say anything, but "Dale came by our place last month. Said the barn was being turned into a community workshed. That it was approved and not to worry about the smell." "What smell?" I asked. She looked like she regretted speaking. "The one coming from the back. It's sharp, like chemicals." That night, I walked out with a flashlight, circled the barn. A thin, oily stream was rippling from the rear side, where the ground sloped down. The grass around it was yellowed. Dead. I crouched, touched it with a stick. It sizzled, faintly. That's when the door creaked open. Dale stood there, silhouetted in the frame. "You looking for something?" he asked, voice low. I straightened slowly, heart pounding. "I live here." He shrugged. "Then you already know the rules." As he disappeared back inside, I realized something had shifted. This wasn't just trash anymore. Something was being hidden, and they were willing to fight to keep it buried. And I was the only one still digging. At first, it was just the smell. Acrid. Metallic, like burnt plastic soaked in vinegar. I tried telling myself it was just the rain mixing with all that junk in the barn. Old paint, moldy wood. God knows what else. But then Daisy stopped going near it. Daisy's my dog, a rescue mutt with more loyalty than sense. She used to follow me everywhere into the barn, up the trail, even under the tractor. But one morning, as we approached the barn, she froze. Hackles up, tail between her legs, and then she whimpered. Actually whimpered, and backed away. That's when I started sleeping with the windows shut. The barn had taken on a new presence. It didn't just look wrong. It felt wrong. Like it was pulsing with something rotten, something not meant to be there. I started hearing faint hissing at night, like pressure escaping from a pipe or maybe just my nerves playing tricks on me. Then one evening, after a stretch of heavy rain, I spotted it. A dark, viscous trail oozing from beneath the barn's side wall. Not water, not mud. This stuff was thick, almost tar-like, but with a chemical sheen, reflecting sickly green and purple in my flashlight's beam. It didn't pool. It crawled. I dipped a gloved finger in it, lifted it close. The fumes punched me in the face. My throat closed. My vision swam. I stumbled back, coughing hard enough to taste blood. That was the moment the last line in my brain snapped. This wasn't just garbage. This was poison. The next morning, I called in a favor from an old college friend who worked in environmental consulting. He gave me a number, a guy named Rick, who did quiet inspections. No paper trail, no fuss. Rick showed up 2 days later in an old Jeep, his gear packed tight in the back. He didn't ask questions, just followed me to the barn, nose twitching like a hound dog the second we got near. I stayed outside while he suited up and went in. 20 minutes passed, then 30. When he finally came out, his face was pale under the mask. He didn't even take it off before speaking. "You need to get away from that structure," he said. "Right now." "What's in there?" I asked, heart pounding. He shook his head. "I'm not equipped to identify everything, but whatever's leaking, it's not residential. It's not legal. And it's definitely not safe. Can you write that down?" He hesitated. "Not officially. I'm not touching this one, man. You need to go federal. EPA." He nodded once, then climbed into his Jeep and drove off without another word. I stood there for a long time, staring at the barn. My barn. My family's legacy. Now a leaking vessel of something no one wanted to admit to. I filed a second complaint with the HOA, citing potential health hazards. 2 days later, I got a notice in the mail. False reporting may result in fines and/or legal review under HOA Code of Conduct Section 9A. I tried talking to Helen again. Her smile was ice. "All materials placed in the structure were done so with oversight," she said. "Nothing hazardous has been confirmed." I showed her the photos. She didn't even glance. Digital manipulation is surprisingly easy these days. I started documenting everything: photos, timestamps, video logs, even the dying vegetation near the leak. But it felt like screaming into a void. Dale, meanwhile, had become omnipresent. He showed up on my street twice a day now, walking that same smug circle like he owned it. He stopped whistling when he passed my driveway. Just stared. One day, I caught him glancing toward the back of the barn with a look I hadn't seen before. Not pride, not defiance. It was fear. And in that moment, I knew he wasn't just part of the problem. He was hiding something he couldn't afford anyone else to find. Rick's silence clung to me like smoke. He hadn't just been alarmed, he'd been scared. And that, more than the sludge leaking from my barn, or the dying shrubs curling like burned paper along the back fence, told me I was in over my head. I waited 3 days. No callback. No update. Nothing from the HOA. Nothing from Rick. Just Dale. Still doing his twice-daily patrol, eyes scanning like a hawk circling roadkill. So I went federal. I found the EPA's anonymous reporting hotline late one night, buried under layers of legalese and government web design. I submitted a detailed report, photos, location, a rough timeline, and a note that I was concerned for residential safety due to suspicious materials being stored without consent. I didn't expect to hear back. But 2 days later, I got a call. Restricted number. "Mr. Langford?" The voice was sharp, direct, female. "Speaking. This is Agent Rowan with the Environmental Protection Agency. You submitted a report referencing an unauthorized storage situation." I felt a flicker of relief. "Yes, I did. Can you confirm that you are the legal owner of the structure in question?" "I am." "And the materials inside, did you place them there?" "No," I said. "They were dumped without my consent, under false pretenses. The local HOA is involved." A pause. "I'll need you to submit a formal affidavit. Anonymous reports help us flag risks, but investigations require documentation." "Will that make my name public?" "Eventually, but we can't proceed without it." I hesitated. This was the point of no return. I could either stay the neighborhood's nuisance or become its enemy. "I'll do it," I said. "Good," Rowan replied. "I'll send you the portal." Later that day, Dale showed up at the edge of my driveway. No clipboard. No smile. "Funny how quiet things have gotten," he said, eyes locked on mine. I didn't respond. He took a step closer. "Reminds me of our little fence squabble last spring. Remember that? You were convinced the boundary line was off by 2 feet. "I remember. Almost made things messy. Surveyor proved you wrong though, didn't he?" I stiffened. "What's your point?" He smiled. Barely. Just saying, sometimes we get fixated on things that don't matter, until we start stepping where we don't belong. He walked away, slow and deliberate, like he'd rehearsed the line in the mirror. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I found something wedged into my mailbox. No envelope, just a folded stack of printed emails, clipped at the top. No sender. But I recognized the handwriting on the clip. Marcy lived 3 houses down. We used to exchange tomatoes in the summer. The first email was from Helen, dated 3 months ago. If we use the Langford property temporarily, we won't have to pay for certified disposal. It's isolated, and he hasn't raised any flags yet. Let Dale handle the approach. Another from Dale. A week later, he bought it, said yes without hesitation. I'll padlock the rear shed so no one stumbles into the old paint drums until we get them buried or moved. I felt sick. This wasn't miscommunication. It wasn't negligence. It was calculated, premeditated, illegal dumping, all dressed up in the polite language of community support. I uploaded the emails into the EPA's report portal, along with everything else I had: photos, video clips, the dead grass, the leak. Then I signed the affidavit. The moment I hit submit, a strange stillness settled over the house. I looked out the window. The barn stood silent, swollen with secrets. The wind pressed against the walls like it wanted to whisper something through the cracks. I had turned on the lights. Now I just had to wait for the storm. It started with a strange car. Matte black, no plates, parked 2 houses down for 20 minutes before slowly rolling past my driveway. No one got out. No one waved. Just tinted windows and a clipboard silhouette in the passenger seat. The next morning, it was back, this time with a second vehicle behind it. I didn't need a badge to know what it meant. The EPA was here. They didn't come in with sirens or news cameras, just 2 agents in dull windbreakers, walking slow and silent across my front lawn. I stepped outside, heart hammering, as they introduced themselves. "Agent Rowan," she said, the same voice from the phone. "And this is Agent Cruz. May we inspect the structure?" I nodded, trying not to show my shaking hands. "It's unlocked." They entered the barn without hesitation. 10 minutes later, they came back to the truck, opened a case, and started suiting up. Full hazmat, white suits, face shields, rubber gloves. The kind of thing you only see when something is seriously wrong. That's when the neighborhood woke up. By noon, word had spread faster than fire on dry pine. I saw heads peeking from behind curtains, cell phones snapping photos from porches. Someone from the HOA must have sounded the alarm, because Dale's truck came tearing down the street like a bat out of hell. He stopped short at the edge of my driveway, eyes locked on the EPA seal on the side of the van. He didn't say a word, just clenched his jaw and drove off. That evening, a sealed envelope was taped to my front door. No postage, just the HOA's letterhead in red ink. "You are in violation of Article 5, Section D, Community Trust Clause. Filing outside reports without board consultation constitutes an adversarial act and may result in administrative penalty." Adversarial act. That's what they were calling it. Not illegal dumping, not hazardous material storage. Adversarial. They were scrambling, and I could feel it. The next morning, Dale posted a notice at the community board. "Emergency HOA meeting, Friday 6 p.m., topic security and misinformation." I didn't plan to attend, but apparently, I didn't need to. People were already talking. That same afternoon, I found a folded note in my mailbox. No name, just a single sentence. "You did the right thing." Later at the gas station down the highway, someone I barely recognized, Ricky, who ran the grocery supply store, nodded at me. "Barn still leaking?" he asked. I blinked. "You heard. It's a small town," he said. "EPA doesn't show up for broken furniture." That night, the HOA's Facebook page lit up like a bonfire. Half the posts were passive-aggressive digs. Some people just want attention. Why destroy our reputation when a conversation could have solved it? But then came the other half. "We all smelled it. I saw Dale dragging drums in at night. We deserve answers." The shift was happening. The fear was cracking. And through it, something new was leaking out. Truth. By the end of the week, EPA posted an official sign at the barn. "Caution, potential environmental hazard. Do not enter my family's barn. My grandfather's legacy." now sealed off behind bright yellow tape and a federal logo. It felt like victory and grief rolled into one. I stood there as the sun went down, watching the hazmat suits moving through the doorway like ghosts. Somewhere inside, beneath rotting drywall and rusted drums, was the truth they didn't want uncovered. And now, the storm wasn't just coming. It had already arrived. "We found chlorinated solvents," she said. "Trichloroethylene, perchloroethylene. Long-term stuff. This isn't leftover paint. It's industrial grade." I blinked, unsure if I heard her right. "That stuff's banned for residential use, right?" She didn't answer the question directly. "These kinds of compounds don't show up in household trash. And the levels we found in the soil, someone's been dumping here for years." Years. I looked out the window at the barn, at the peeling siding and warped roof that had stood through 3 generations. My chest tightened. "How deep is the contamination?" I asked. "Deep enough to flag a potential groundwater threat." That was it. The tipping point. It wasn't just my problem anymore. It was the community's. Maybe even the whole county's. But Rowan wasn't done. We ran zoning files. Something came up. Odd property lines. Survey flags that don't match our records. "You might want to look into your county assessor's maps." I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I pored over property records, satellite photos, public permits, and that's when I found it. Something that made my stomach sink. A proposed development plan submitted 6 months ago. Mixed-use real estate project. 60 upscale units, fitness center, and a boutique grocery store. The footprint? It stretched right up to my back fence. Only that fence wasn't on the developer's version of the map. According to their blueprint, my land, the barn, the field behind it, was listed as community easement. I checked the listed contacts. One name popped out immediately: Dale McConnell, site liaison. I stared at the screen in disbelief. The garbage, the pressure, the fake HOA clauses, the strange emails. It wasn't just about storage. It was about forcing me off my own land. They wanted to bury the contamination, file a transfer permit, and quietly swap ownership through eminent domain or community vote. I was the last holdout. The trash wasn't random, it was targeted. They were choking my property until I begged them to take it off my hands. My mind reeled backward, through every polite lie Dale ever told me, every empty promise, every smug smile. He was never the helpful neighbor. He was a wolf in cargo shorts. And I'd let him in the front gate. Worse yet, he had others helping him, people who knew Helen, the HOA board. Anyone who signed off on those minutes, approved those meetings, stayed quiet when the ground started to rot. They were all in on it. I called Agent Rowan again. "There's more," I said. "You need to see this development file. Dale's connected." She didn't sound surprised. "We'll loop in the zoning commission." For the first time in months, I didn't feel crazy. I felt furious. It wasn't just a betrayal of trust. It was a theft of legacy. My grandfather built that barn when America still used rotary phones. My parents raised me in that house when the roads were still gravel. And now, a handful of neighbors and a greedy developer wanted to sweep it all into concrete and condo fees. They wanted to poison my land, erase my name, and call it progress. But now, I had proof. I had federal attention. I had fire in my blood. And for the first time, they were the ones with something to lose. The envelope showed up on my porch like a ghost dropping a confession at my feet. No return address, no note. Just a thick manila packet, held closed with a red string, the kind you only see in courtroom dramas or crime documentaries. I half expected it to be empty. A prank. A threat. But when I opened it, I nearly dropped it right there on the steps. HOA meeting transcripts. Internal memos. Voting records. Unpublished agendas. Over 80 pages, detailed, time-stamped, damning. The documents covered everything, from the very first conversation about strategic acquisition of adjacent property, to a vote labeled Use of Environmental Clause for Targeted Transition. And every name was there. Dale, Helen, Joyce, even Marcy. But the signature that hit hardest was scrawled at the bottom of one of the most recent memos, prepared by Kimberly Marks, board secretary. Kimberly, the quiet one, barely spoke at meetings. always sat in the corner, typing down, eyes flickering nervously whenever Dale spoke. I hadn't even known her last name until now. She was the one who cracked. I read every line. One excerpt stuck out like poison. Langford's resistance is disrupting Phase 1. Recommend applying procedural stress. Leverage waste clause. Push narrative of non-compliance. Dale can handle the optics. Procedural stress. Leverage waste clause. They made it sound so clean, so calculated. Like my life was just a stubborn square on a developer's chessboard. I forwarded everything to Agent Rowan before I finished reading. Her response came less than an hour later. She contacted us too. She's ready to testify. That's when everything began to crumble. The very next day, Helen resigned. No fanfare, no explanation. Just a short post on the HOA website, thanking the community and citing health reasons. But the rumors started instantly. Someone had seen EPA agents speaking with her in her driveway. Another neighbor said Dale's name came up during a zoning subcommittee meeting downtown. And then came the real kicker. Dale vanished. One morning he was there, watering his over-manicured hedges, fake smiling at joggers. The next, his driveway was empty. Curtains drawn. Mail piling up. His truck gone. At first people assumed he was laying low. Then whispers turned into phone calls. The city council held a closed session. The EPA issued a statement confirming a multi-agency investigation involving environmental misrepresentation and zoning fraud. They didn't name names, but the neighborhood didn't need names. Suddenly, the same board members who once sneered at me across community meetings were publicly distancing themselves. Joyce, who'd once threatened to fine me over my compost bin, posted on Facebook about being misled by leadership. Marcy went door to door with flyers about restoring trust and neighborhood governance. Even Ricky from the nursery cornered me at the gas station again. "Whole damn board's scrambling," he said. Dale was the spine. And now, they're jelly. What shocked me most wasn't the collapse, it was how fast it happened. Once the first crack formed, the entire facade split like rotted wood. Guilt breeds desperation, and desperate people start talking. People I hadn't spoken to in weeks suddenly acted like old friends. Some apologized, others made excuses. But no one defended Dale anymore. No one dared. Kimberly and I met in person 2 weeks later. She looked fragile, like someone who hadn't slept in months. Her hands trembled when she passed me a flash drive. "I should have said something sooner," she whispered. "I thought maybe it was just politics. But when they started talking about burying drums, I couldn't be part of it." "You're not," I told her. "Not anymore." As she walked away, shoulders a little straighter, I realized something. They'd tried to isolate me, turn me into the villain, make me fold. But all it took was one voice, tired, scared, honest, to bring the whole rotten tower crashing down. And now, all that was left was for the rubble to be cleared and the truth to be seen in daylight. I didn't need revenge. I just wanted the truth to come out, and it did, louder than I expected. The subpoenas came in brown envelopes with federal seals and names typed in all caps. I didn't deliver them, of course. The EPA handled that, but I heard about the aftermath the same way everything spreads in a town like ours, through back fences, grocery aisles, and the awkward pauses at mailboxes. Joyce got hers at the HOA office. Helen was served during a yoga class. Marcy opened hers during church coffee hour and left mid-sermon. And Dale, well, Dale didn't get a letter. He got handcuffed. I watched it on the news, sitting in the same living room where I used to read HOA newsletters and laugh at the pettiness of it all. There he was, Dale McConnell, being led out of a courthouse in Raleigh, his expression carved from stone. Charged with falsifying zoning documents, illegal disposal of hazardous waste, and multiple counts of environmental fraud. I didn't cheer. I didn't pour a drink. I just let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding since this whole thing began. The media, of course, latched onto the drama. Small-town HOA, at center of toxic waste scandal, ran on the evening broadcast. A reporter called me the barn whistleblower, which made me cringe, but I let it slide. Another outlet showed drone footage of my property, yellow tape still fluttering at the barn like crime scene confetti. I never wanted to be the face of anything. But sometimes standing still is the loudest thing you can do. EPA officials held a town hall. For the first time, the community heard the truth in official language: solvent traces, groundwater risks, years of concealed waste disposal masquerading as storage. They presented charts, maps, testimonies. Kimberly's name was listed as a cooperating witness. The shock was real. Faces turned pale. Neighbors cried. Some shouted. Others just sat quietly, trying to process how the system meant to protect them had used their trust as cover. Within a month, the HOA was dissolved, voluntarily disbanded, according to their statement. Though we all knew better. The developer behind Dale's real estate scheme pulled out of the project completely after Rowan confirmed the soil contamination made the area ineligible for residential rezoning. They'd built their empire on rot and now it was unsellable. Some neighbors moved out, not wanting to live in the shadow of scandal. Others came to my door, pie in hand, apology on lips. I nodded politely. I wasn't looking for reconciliation. I wasn't bitter. Just tired. They hadn't all known what was happening, but they'd let silence stretch when they should have asked questions. And silence, as I'd learned, is its own kind of complicity. The barn stayed sealed for weeks. EPA contractors came through in trucks, testing soil, removing drums, decontaminating layer by layer. They said it might take years to fully restore the land. I told them to take all the time they needed. This wasn't about rebuilding fast. It was about making sure no one ever buried something like that again, physically or otherwise. A month after the final EPA team left, I stood in the middle of the cleared barn floor. The structure still stood, battered but upright. A few beams had been replaced, some walls patched. The air smelled like wood again. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe. I never wanted to be a hero, never asked to be a symbol. I just wanted to be heard, to protect what was mine, to tell the truth when everyone else was busy pretending the lie was easier. And in the end, that was enough. Because sometimes, doing the right thing doesn't feel like winning. But it sure as hell feels like freedom. They tried to bury me in my own barn. Instead, I unearthed everything they were trying to hide. A year can change everything. 12 months ago, my barn was a biohazard crime scene wrapped in caution tape and secrets. Today, it's clean, quiet, whole again. The siding has been replaced, the beams sanded and stained. The air smells like cedar and dust, not chemicals. The soil, tested clean after months of careful excavation, finally grew grass again. I even planted a few wildflowers where the leak once killed everything in its path. There's still a scar. Some stains don't wash out easy, but it stands strong, just like it always did. Sometimes I walk in and just sit for a while. No tools, no chores, just me. The sun sliding through the rafters, and the faint hum of the past still settling into peace. I almost gave up. More than once. When the board gaslit me, when Dale threatened me, when the neighborhood turned its back, there were ways I wanted to sell, walk away, leave them to rot in their own lies. But I couldn't. Not because I wanted to win, but because they weren't supposed to win. And in the end, they did. The EPA's cleanup is complete. Dale's trial wrapped 3 months ago. He pled guilty to 4 counts of environmental fraud and falsification of legal documents. He won't be walking anyone's property lines for a long time. The dissolved HOA was replaced by a new, transparent neighborhood council. Not perfect, but no longer unchecked. And something else happened, too. Something better than I ever expected. A few of us, me, Kimberly, and 2 other residents who stepped up when the dust settled, formed a non-profit Ground Rights. We work with small-town homeowners across the state to fight HOA corruption and illegal zoning schemes. We help people find their voice before they lose their land. Turns out, my case wasn't unique. Just louder. The press died down after a while, but not before people noticed. We've helped stop 2 similar incidents in other counties. We even got a call from a senator's office asking for input on a new property rights bill. I still don't like attention, but I've learned the difference between noise and impact. A few months ago, I got lunch with Agent Rowan. She was off duty, in jeans and a leather jacket, nothing like the hazmat-clad professional who first inspected my barn. We sat outside a local diner. She stirred her tea twice before speaking. "You want to know something strange?" she asked. Stranger than a suburban HOA turning my barn into a chemical war zone. I smiled. I used to live here, she said, eyes flicking toward the hills, 3 blocks down, back when I first got married. I blinked. Wait, here? In our neighborhood? She nodded. Wasn't called Stone Hollow back then, just Hollow Creek. The HOA came in later. We had a disagreement about a fence line and solar panels. They threatened us with lanes. We moved. I sat back, stunned. So that's why you took the case so personally. She smiled faintly. Let's just say, I knew the signs when I saw them. It hit me then, this story didn't start with me, and it wouldn't end with me, either. This was bigger than one barn, one board, one corrupt neighbor. It was about standing in the way of systems designed to squeeze you out, one technicality at a time. It was about refusing to be erased. As I stood inside my barn this morning, watching a bluebird land on the edge of the windowsill, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Pride, not just in what I saved, but in what I exposed. They tried to pressure me, shame me, bury me under bureaucracy and waste. But instead they handed me a shovel, and I used it to dig up the truth. The barn that once held poison now holds purpose. We host monthly workshops here on homeowner rights, soil safety, legal literacy. A space built by my grandfather has become something new. A place where stories get told, where people listen, where no one ever again gets buried without a fight. Think your HOA is just about lawn heights and mailbox paint. Think again. Every quiet street has a story buried beneath it. This was just one they couldn't keep down. Stick around. We dig deeper, we uncover more, and we don't look away. Because when power hides in plain sight, someone has to turn the lights on.